Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Owen Brennan. Never imagined. Never imagined that a gesture of love could become the instrument of his own humiliation. He was 37. A paramedic. In the coastal city of Port Sterling. A job he'd chosen not for its meager pay, but for its profound purpose. His life was measured in 12-hour shifts. Shifts that began at 5. In the morning, he would return home. The exhaustion settled deep in his bones. Yet always carrying that quiet, internal certainty. The certainty that he had mattered. In someone's day. He had held a hand as a life faded. Cleared an airway to restore a first breath. Been a calm voice. In the vortex of chaos. He was a man of simple gestures, of measured words. The kind who showed affection through action. Not grand declarations. He fixed leaky faucets. Made coffee. Just the way she liked it. And he always remembered to pick up her favorite Pinot Noir on his way home. That very quality, which should have been a strength, had slowly, insidiously, become a source of contempt in his wife's eyes. Lena Hayes. She was 33. She worked in marketing, at one of Port Sterling's most prestigious agencies. A world away from the grit and immediacy of his. Her days were a whirlwind. Of rooftop cocktail parties. Client dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. And national conferences. Where powerful figures exchanged business cards. And hollow promises. In the early years, she had introduced him with pride. A note of it, clear in her voice. "This is Owen," she would say. "He saved lives." It was as if his profession lent him a kind of romantic nobility. A rugged authenticity that stood in stark contrast to the polished veneer of her corporate circle. But things changed. As her career soared. As her salary tripled his. That initial admiration. It curdled. It became something darker. Condescension. It began subtly. A series of paper cuts. To his self-worth. Passing comments. "It would be so nice if you had bigger ambitions." Or she'd recount, with exaggerated admiration, the accomplishments of her colleagues' husbands. Investment bankers. Tech entrepreneurs. Corporate lawyers. Owen would listen, a knot tightening in his gut. And he would remain, exactly who he had always been. He didn't know how to be anyone else. He couldn't articulate the quiet honor he found in his work. The feeling of resetting a dislocated shoulder, or stabilizing a patient after a catastrophic accident. In Lena's world, success was measured in quarterly reports. In client acquisitions. In his, it was measured in heartbeats per minute. He felt the chasm between them widening. With each passing month. She spoke a language of engagement metrics. And brand synergy, that he didn't understand. And he saw the flicker of impatience in her eyes when he tried to share a story from his shift. The life or death dramas he faced daily. To her, they seemed mundane. Or worse. Small. He was the sturdy, reliable foundation of their life. But she was a woman who had forgotten the importance of the ground beneath her feet. Her gaze fixed permanently on the skyline. The quiet love he offered through his actions, it wasn't enough anymore. It seemed she now craved a love that could be showcased. A partner, who would be an accessory to her own rising star. On a crisp September afternoon, Owen had the day off. The autumn sun streamed through the windows of the house they'd shared for 9 years. A comfortable home. In a quiet, middle-class neighborhood. The night before, Lena had casually mentioned it. Wanting to host a few coworkers for dinner. Something low-key, she'd said. But, potentially useful. For professional connections. Wanting to surprise her, to show his support in the only way he knew how. Owen decided to handle everything. He spent the morning at the market, carefully selecting fresh ingredients. Wild mushrooms for the risotto. Vine-ripened tomatoes for the bruschetta. Mascarpone for a homemade tiramisu. The entire afternoon was a flurry of activity in the kitchen. He chopped. He stirred. He tasted. He set the dining table with the fine china they hardly ever used. He lit candles. And arranged a bouquet of fresh flowers as the centerpiece. When he finished, at 6 o'clock in the evening, the house was spotless. And it was filled with the fragrant aroma of his cooking. Oven fait a genuine satisfaction. The kind that comes from creating something with care, for someone you love. It was a tangible expression of his affection. Lena arrived home at 6:30. She opened the door and saw the elegantly set table, the immaculate house, and Owen, standing there, still wearing an apron tied at his waist. Her expression, it wasn't gratitude. It was something he couldn't immediately place. Something between embarrassment and thinly veiled irritation. "You did all this?" she asked. And her tone carried more judgment than appreciation. Owen's smile faltered, but he tried to ignore the strange current in the air. "I thought I'd help. You said you wanted to have the girls over. So I put together a full dinner." Lena looked around, her eyes scanning the room, as if assessing a marketing campaign that had gone off-brand. She bit her lower lip, muttered a stiff, "Thanks," before heading upstairs to change. Owen stood alone in the living room, that first pang of discomfort already settling heavy in his chest. The guests arrived promptly at 7. 3 of Lena's colleagues. Elegant women in their 30s, dressed in designer clothes, speaking a corporate jargon that was foreign to Owen. And with them, unexpectedly, came a man. Victor Sterling, 40 years old, with flecks of gray at his temples, wearing an expensive suit without a tie, and a smile. The kind of smile that suggested he was accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Lena introduced him with an excessive, almost frantic ease. "This is Victor, a partner at the firm. We're working on a huge project together, so I thought it would be good for him to join the conversation tonight." Owen shook Victor's hand. The grip was too firm, too territorial. "Pleasure," Victor said, but his eyes had already drifted past Owen, dismissing him, as if he were part of the decor. Irrelevant. Dinner began. Owen served the appetizer. He filled the wine glasses. He tried to join the conversation, but quickly realized he was invisible. The talk was dominated by Lena and Victor. A rapid-fire exchange about campaign strategies, difficult clients, market analytics. The other colleagues chimed in occasionally, but the real energy, the real connection, was between the two of them. Owen noticed everything. The way Lena leaned toward Victor when he spoke. How she laughed, a little too loudly, at his jokes. How she casually touched his arm when making a point. Small gestures, but they were thick with an intimacy that felt jarringly out of place. Victor, in turn, returned them with lingering glances, and smiles that lasted a fraction of a second too long. Owen felt his stomach churn, not with childish jealousy, but with a deep, unsettling intuition that something was profoundly wrong. Then came the moment that would split his world in two. He had just brought out the main course, carefully serving the creamy mushroom risotto onto each plate. He was leaning beside Lena, placing her portion on the table, when she turned to the others. Her tone was casual, almost theatrical, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Perfectly. Owen is just so helpful," she said, a strange lilt in her voice. "It's not a quality you find in truly successful men." The words hung in the air for an endless, deafening second. The colleagues laughed nervously, unsure how to react. Victor, however, smiled with unapologetic arrogance. "Well," he added smoothly, "someone's got to take care of the house. While the real professionals are out building empires, right?" The table erupted in laughter. Louder this time, relieved of the tension. And Lena laughed along with them. She turned to look directly at Owen, who was still standing there, frozen, the serving spoon still in his hand. There was a cruel glint in her eyes as she said, "Exactly. Some men are born to serve. Others are born to lead. You get that, don't you, Victor?" Owen felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The noise of the room grew distant, muffled, as if he were underwater. He looked at Lena, his eyes silently pleading with her. "Realize what you've done. Take it back. Say it was just a terrible joke." But she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was busy laughing with Victor, touching his arm again, completely oblivious, or completely indifferent, to the profound pain she had just inflicted. He was no longer her husband. In that moment, he was the punchline. Owen set the serving spoon down on the platter. A quiet click that no one heard. He muttered something. "Don't feel well," and walked out of the dining room. No one tried to stop him. No one asked if he was okay. The party went on without him. As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, he could hear their lively chatter. Bursts of laughter. Continuing as if nothing had happened. As if he had never been there at all. He locked the bedroom door. And sat on the edge of the bed. His hands were trembling. It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was the sudden, brutal realization of how Lena truly saw him. Not as a partner. Not as an equal. But as someone inferior. Someone who existed to make her life easier. To serve. To stay in the background. While she shone. Years of subtle comments. Condescending glances. And small cruelties disguised as jokes. They all converged. In that single, devastating moment. He realized, with a clarity that was physically painful, that their marriage had been dead for a very long time. He had just refused to see it. The house finally fell silent. At 2 a.m, he heard the slurred goodbyes at the door. The sound of cars pulling away. And then, nothing. Lena didn't come upstairs. After another hour of sitting in the dark, he went down. He found her asleep on the living room sofa. Still in her designer dress. A half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table beside her. She hadn't even bothered to come to their bedroom. To offer an explanation. An apology. Anything. Her indifference was the final confirmation. Owen went back upstairs. But he knew he wouldn't sleep. The raw pain of humiliation was morphing. Becoming something colder. Sharper. More determined. He needed answers. He needed to know if the intimacy he'd witnessed was real. Or just a paranoia fueled by his wounded pride. At 5 o'clock in the morning. Still wide awake in the pre-dawn gloom. Owen went downstairs again. Lena was still asleep on the sofa, a faint snore escaping her lips. Her personal laptop was on the coffee table. Open. But in sleep mode. She always left everything logged in. Never worried about privacy in their home. After all, what would Owen do? He was helpful. Domestic. Harmless. He picked up the laptop. His movements slow. Deliberate. He sat in the armchair across the room, and opened the screen. Her personal email was already open. He hesitated. For only a second. A final flicker of the man he used to be. Before his resolve hardened. He began to search. He didn't have to search for long. The sent folder was filled with messages between Julia and Victor Sterling. Owen clicked on the first one. And his heart dropped. They were love letters. Disguised in corporate speak, but explicit in their intent. Can't wait for the strategy session at the hotel on Thursday. From 3 weeks ago. That work trip was incredible. Especially the part where we didn't work. From 2 months earlier. There were photos. Not explicit, but intimate in a way that felt far more violating. Lena and Victor. In a hotel room. A bottle of champagne on the table. Her head resting on his shoulder as she laughed. The same uninhibited laugh she used to share with Owen. In the early years. He felt sick. A sour taste rising in his throat. But he kept reading. Scrolling through months. Of meticulously documented betrayal. In an email from 5 weeks ago, Lena had written to Victor. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still married. Owen is useful, doesn't cause trouble, but he doesn't challenge me, he doesn't make me feel alive. You do. Victor's reply was swift. And brutal. Then leave him. You deserve more than a husband who spends his life in an ambulance caring for strangers while you build empires. Lena's response sealed Owen's fate. I'm waiting for the right moment. I need things to align professionally first, but it'll happen. I promise. The messages chronicled 4 months of lies. 4 months of hotel meetings disguised as business trips. Of carefully constructed alibis. Of shared contempt for the man she came home to every night. In one particularly cruel message from just 3 weeks ago, she wrote, Owen made a romantic dinner for our anniversary yesterday. It was sweet, in a sad, pathetic way. It just made me think about how small he is, compared to you. Something inside Owen broke. But it wasn't despair. It was clarity. Cold, unshakable, and absolute. He went to the desk drawer. found a flash drive, and copied everything. Every message, every email, every photograph. He saved it all, closed the laptop carefully, and placed it back on the coffee table, exactly as he had found it. Lena was still asleep, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse around her. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Owen took a shower. He let the hot water run over him, not to wash away the filth of the night, but to solidify the cold resolve that had settled in his core. He got dressed, went downstairs, and made coffee. At 7, Lena woke up to the smell of brewing coffee. She rubbed her eyes, stretched, and headed upstairs to change, without saying a word to him. When she came back down, dressed for work, Owen was sitting at the kitchen table. Her laptop was open in front of him. Victor's emails, filling the screen. Lena froze. In the doorway, the color draining from her face. "What are you doing?" she asked. And for the first time in years, there was genuine fear in her voice. Owen didn't look up from the screen. "I'm reading," he said. His voice was devoid of all emotion. "Reading about how I'm small, helpful, and useful. Apparently, I'm also sad." She tried to recover, striding to the table with a false composure. "Owen, you shouldn't be reading my private emails. That is a massive invasion of privacy." Owen finally looked up at her, and what Lena saw in his eyes made her take an involuntary step back. It wasn't the explosive rage she might have expected. It was something far worse. Absolute coldness. Crystallized disappointment. "Privacy?" he repeated, a dry, humorless laugh escaping his lips. "You're serious? You humiliate me in front of strangers, cheat on me for 4 months, and plan to leave me when it's professionally convenient for you. And you're worried about privacy?" She tried to minimize it, her voice turning pleading. "It was just a phase, Owen. I was confused. It didn't mean anything." "Liar," he said. The word cut through the air like a shard of glass. He shook his head slowly. "I read it all, Lena. Every message. Every plan. Every insult. You're not confused. You know exactly what you're doing." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "And I know exactly what I'm going to do now." Her desperation grew. "Owen, please. We can talk about this. We can go to therapy. We can fix it." Owen stood up, closed the laptop, and pushed it across the table toward her. "There is nothing to fix." His voice was calm, final. "You have 24 hours to leave this house." "What?" she whispered, her face a mask of disbelief. "You heard me. Pack your things. And get out. On Monday morning, I will be filing for divorce. I suggest you call Victor. Ask if he has a hotel room available. You two seem to be so good at finding them." She started to argue, to protest. But something in his posture, the unshakable firmness, the absolute finality in his eyes, made the words die in her throat. The man she had dismissed as weak and passive was gone. In his place was a stranger she didn't recognize. She went upstairs. He heard her making a few quiet, frantic calls from the guest room. By late afternoon, she had left, carrying 2 suitcases. A look of profound shock still etched on her face. She truly hadn't believed that helpful, domestic Owen would ever have the courage to kick her out. She had miscalculated. She had underestimated him completely. What Lena never knew, and would never know, was that Owen held a secret. A secret that would have completely changed the narrative she had so carefully constructed about him being the small man in their marriage. 6 months before that fateful dinner, Owen's maternal grandmother, a woman named Dorothy Brennan, had passed away. At the age of 89, Owen had grown up in a modest family, but Dorothy, over decades, had quietly built a small empire. In the 1970s and 80s, she bought up small commercial properties in what were then considered undesirable neighborhoods of Port Sterling. She invested in fledgling tech stocks when no one else believed in them, and held on to everything with an unshakable, patient faith. When she died, she left her surprising inheritance to her only grandson, a collection of 6 commercial properties, now worth fortunes due to gentrification, plus a portfolio of Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon shares, bought in the 90s and never sold. The total value of the inheritance, after taxes, was $6.5 million. When Owen received the news, he was stunned. The number was so vast. It felt abstract. He could retire, travel the world, change his life completely. But Owen was, by nature, a cautious man. He didn't rush out and buy a sports car. Instead, he consulted lawyers, financial planners, wealth management experts. He was processing it all in silence, planning his future, and thinking about how to tell Lena at the right moment. But a small part of him, a part he was almost ashamed to admit, wanted to wait. He wanted to see if she loved him for who he was, a middle-class paramedic with a good heart, or if she was just waiting for something better to come along. The humiliating dinner gave him the answer, in the most brutal way possible. And now, Owen knew exactly what to do with that information. Absolutely nothing. Lena would never know. The 4-month divorce process was contentious. Lena and her high-priced lawyer fought fiercely, demanding access to all of Owen's financial records. They found only the joint checking account, the modest savings accumulated over 9 years of marriage, and nothing else. Her lawyer hinted that Owen must be hiding assets, but there was nothing to find. At least, nothing that was legally accessible for marital division. Owen's lawyer, a sharp man named Marcus Thorne, ensured the inheritance remained completely protected. It had been received by Owen after the couple's factual separation, a fact easily proven by the time-stamped emails between Lena and Victor. Furthermore, the inheritance was Owen's sole and separate property, never commingled with marital assets, and safely firewalled within a family trust. In the end, Lena received half of their joint savings, about $35,000, her imported car, and her personal belongings. She had expected so much more. She had expected the house. She had expected alimony. She had expected the helpful paramedic to have something more meaningful to offer. She discovered, far too late, that she had completely underestimated the man she had betrayed. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Lena and Victor went public with their relationship. Photos of them appeared on social media, clinking champagne glasses at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Aspen, a life of curated success. Lena looked radiant, finally free of the dead weight that was Owen, finally with a man she considered to be on her level. Their happiness lasted exactly 2 months. The firm where they both worked launched a routine internal audit and uncovered serious irregularities in accounts managed by Victor Sterling. He had been embezzling company funds, diverting them into risky personal investments in cryptocurrencies and failed startups. The total amount stolen reached $500,000. Victor was immediately fired and faced criminal prosecution. The investigation expanded, and Lena, as the marketing officer who worked directly with him, who had signed off on documents, was dragged into the scandal. Though the investigation ultimately concluded that Lena had no knowledge of the embezzlement and bore no criminal responsibility, her professional reputation was irreparably damaged. The firm quietly fired her, offering a generous severance package in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. Lena accepted, but she quickly realized that no one else in Port Sterling wanted to hire her. The scandal had spread. Her name was now tied to corporate fraud and unethical behavior. Victor, under federal investigation, with his assets frozen, ended things with her via text message. "It was fun while it lasted, but I need to focus on my defense now. Good luck." Lena was stunned. She was alone, unemployed, and facing the brutal reality of having torched a stable marriage for a man who discarded her at the first sign of trouble. While Lena's world crumbled, Owen was building something new. He retired from his paramedic job, leaving behind a 15-year career with the quiet gratitude of his colleagues and the countless patients whose lives he had touched. He invested the inheritance wisely, hiring conservative financial managers who generated solid, steady returns. He bought a spacious house in the mountains just outside the city, with panoramic views of snow-capped peaks and surrounded by pine forests. But Owen didn't just want a life of comfortable leisure. He still needed purpose. So he founded a nonprofit organization, The First Response Foundation, dedicated to training paramedics and emergency medical technicians in underserved rural communities across the state. The foundation offered free courses, state-of-the-art equipment, and even scholarships for young people. Owen invested $1 million of his own money to launch the project. And within a year, it had trained over 200 new professionals. His story caught the attention of the local media. A Port Sterling newspaper ran a cover story on the former paramedic who used a family inheritance to transform lives. The article included photos of Owen at his new home, surrounded by students from the foundation, a genuine smile on his face for the first time in years. The piece briefly mentioned he was divorced, but focused on his inspiring journey of overcoming personal hardship and finding a new purpose. Lena saw the article. She was unemployed, living in a small rented apartment on the grimmier side of town, trying to rebuild her career from scratch. When she saw Owen's photo, the mountain house, and the casual mention of a significant family inheritance, she felt like the ground had vanished from beneath her feet. She did the math. His grandmother had died 6 months before their separation. 6 months. And he had never said a word. She tried to reach out. First, a text. "Owen, I saw the article. We need to talk." No reply. Then, a long email. "I know I made terrible mistakes. I was cruel and unjust, but you have to understand, I deserve to know about the inheritance. We could have had a different life. Please respond." No reply. Finally, a desperate, tearful call that went straight to voicemail. "Owen, please. I just want to talk, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Owen listened to all the messages. He read every email. And he deleted them. Without responding. It wasn't out of revenge or cruelty. It was because he understood something fundamental. People who humiliate you publicly, who mock your love, who plan to discard you when it's convenient, they don't deserve explanations. They don't deserve second chances. They don't deserve access to the life you build after they are gone. A year and a half after the divorce, Owen was completely transformed. He met Hannah, a 34-year-old nurse who volunteered with his foundation. Hannah was divorced, a mother to a 7-year-old daughter, and possessed a quiet strength and genuine kindness that Owen had forgotten could exist. They started dating slowly, building something solid, on a foundation of mutual admiration and shared values. Hannah didn't care about his inheritance. She fell for the man who woke up early to teach young people how to save lives. The man who listened intently when she spoke, who made pancakes for her daughter on Sunday mornings, and who treated her as an equal in every way. On sleepless nights, when the loneliness felt like a physical weight, Lena would think of that September dinner. She would think of the wild mushroom risotto Owen had made with such care. She would think of the look on his face when she said, "Some men are born to serve." She would think of how, in that exact moment, she had lost the only person who had ever truly cared about her. Not for what she represented professionally, but for who she was. The last time she saw him was 2 years after the divorce. At a corporate charity gala in Port Sterling. She was there representing her small new firm, trying to network, to rebuild bridges. Across the crowded ballroom, she saw Owen. He was in a tuxedo, accompanied by Hannah, who looked stunning in an elegant blue dress. They were chatting with a group of local philanthropists. Laughing. At ease. Owen looked happier and more confident than she had ever seen him. She thought about approaching him, saying something, anything. But then, their eyes met. For a brief second. Across the room. There was no anger in his gaze. No hatred. No pity. There was nothing. He simply looked away, and continued his conversation, as if she were a complete stranger. And that's exactly what she had become. A stranger, who once had the chance to build a life beside an extraordinary man, but chose to humiliate him, instead of honoring him. In the end, Owen learned the most liberating lesson of all. Not everyone who loses you deserves to find you again. And as Lena sank deeper into a life defined by her regrets, Owen climbed mountains, both literally and metaphorically, proving only to himself that a man born to serve can choose to serve greater causes. build a lasting impact, and live with a dignity that no humiliation can ever steal. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.